If someone told you love could survive death, would you believe them? Daniel Carter proved it every single day, but the world called him crazy for it. Tonight, I'm sharing a story that will redefine everything you think you know about loyalty, sacrifice, and what it means to truly stand by your vows. Stay until the end to see how one man's impossible devotion changed the heart of the most powerful woman in his world. Before we begin, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels across the globe. The fluorescent lights of Carter and Hayes. Financial hummed their usual Tuesday evening drone as the clock on Daniel Carter's desk ticked toward 5:29 p.m. His fingers moved across the keyboard with mechanical precision, closing spreadsheets and logging out of terminal windows with the practiced efficiency of a man who had performed this exact routine 1,000 times before. Around him, the office buzzed with the comfortable chaos of people settling into the long hall. Analysts hunched over quarterly projections. Junior associates ordering dinner delivery for the third night that week. Partners still on conference calls that would stretch past midnight. Daniel saved his final document at 5:29 and 43 seconds. He reached for his jacket at 5:29 and 51 seconds. By 5:30 and 8 seconds, he was already moving toward the elevator, his weathered leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder, his expression carefully neutral. "Carter, hold up." Marcus Webb's voice cut through the ambient office noise. Marcus, senior analyst and unofficial spokesman for everyone who stayed past 7, pushed away from his desk with the kind of casual authority that came from being the boss's favorite. "We're ordering Thai from that place on Lexington. You in?" Daniel pressed the elevator button without breaking stride. "Can't tonight." "You can any night," Marcus called after him. "Come on, man. It's been what, 3 years? You've turned down every single happy hour, every team dinner, every—" The elevator doors opened. Daniel stepped inside. "Some other time," he said, knowing there would never be another time, knowing Marcus knew it too. The doors slid shut on Marcus's exasperated expression, and Daniel allowed himself exactly 3 seconds of closed eyes and steady breathing before the elevator lurched into motion. By the time it reached the lobby, his face had reset into its default mode, pleasant, unremarkable, forgettable. The March wind hit him the moment he pushed through the revolving doors. New York in early spring was a study in contrasts, bright sun and bitter cold, hopeful crocuses shoving through dirty snow, tourists in too thin jackets shivering beside hot dog carts. Daniel merged into the flow of evening commuters with practiced ease, just another suit heading home after another day of pushing papers and moving money. Except Daniel Carter never went straight home. The 6 train was packed, as always. He stood near the doors, one hand on the pole, the other checking his phone. 2 missed calls from his mother. He'd return those later. 1 text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor, confirming she'd picked up Lily from aftercare. No emergencies, no disasters. Just another Tuesday of holding the world together through sheer force of will and obsessive scheduling. He got off at 77th Street and walked 4 blocks east, past the bodega where he bought Lily's favorite fruit snacks, past the dry cleaner that still had his suits from 2 months ago, past the playground where he and Sarah used to bring Lily when she was still small enough to fit down the toddler slide. The Lenox Hill Care Center sat between a dental office and a private school, its brick facade weathered but dignified. Daniel had the code memorized, 4729, and the security guard, Ramon, barely glanced up from his crossword puzzle as Daniel signed in. "Evening, Mr. Carter." "Evening, Ramon, how's the puzzle?" "Stuck on 12 down. Ancient Greek marketplace. 7 letters." "Agora," Daniel said without stopping. "Hey, that works. Thanks, man. The elevator in this building was older, slower, and made a grinding sound between the 2nd and 3rd floors that Daniel had learned to ignore. Room 307 sat at the end of the east corridor, 3rd door from the nurses' station, with a view of the street below if you stood at the right angle by the window. Daniel paused with his hand on the door handle, a habit he'd developed somewhere in the first year. Paused, breathed, centered himself, then pushed inside. Sarah Carter lay exactly where she'd been for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The late afternoon sun slanted through the half-open blinds, painting stripes across the pale blue blanket tucked around her still form. Her dark hair, which he combed every Sunday, spread across the pillow. Her hands, which he moisturized twice a week, rested palm up on either side of her body. The machines monitoring her vitals hummed and beeped their steady rhythm. Heartbeat, respiration, blood pressure, all the quantifiable signs of a body that refused to quit, even though the mind had long since retreated somewhere beyond reach. "Hey, love." Daniel set his bag on the chair and crossed to her bedside in 3 familiar steps. He took her left hand in both of his thumb automatically finding the ridge of her wedding ring, the simple gold band he'd slid onto her finger 8. Years ago in a courthouse ceremony with 6 people in attendance and more love than any cathedral could hold. "Sorry I'm a few minutes late. The 6 train was delayed at Union Square. Signal malfunction, they said, but I think somebody probably pulled the emergency brake again. You know how it goes." He pulled the chair closer and sat, still holding her hand, studying her face for any sign of the woman who used to laugh so hard at her own jokes that she'd snort, who could diffuse his worst moods with a single raised eyebrow, who told him the day Lily was born that he was going to be the kind of father who changed everything. "Lily lost another tooth," he continued, falling into the one-sided conversation as naturally as breathing. "Front bottom one. She was so excited she could barely eat dinner last night. Just kept poking at the gap with her tongue. Mrs. Patterson says the adult tooth is already coming in, so that's good. I told Lily we should put the tooth under her pillow for the tooth fairy, and she looked at me like I was crazy. She said, 'Dad, I'm 8. I know the tooth fairy is you.' Smart kid. You're smart kid. Bye, go." A nurse appeared in the doorway. Brenda, one of the evening shift regulars, with kind eyes and the kind of matter-of-fact competence that made Daniel trust her with Sarah's care. "Evening, Daniel. Just checking vitals." "Of course." He didn't let go of Sarah's hand while Brenda worked, checking the IV line, adjusting the feeding tube, making notes on the chart. They'd long since moved past the awkward dance of him leaving the room for every medical procedure. This was Sarah's life now. His life. Their life. No point pretending it was anything other than what it was. "She's stable, Shunt," Brenda said, which was what she always said. Stable, the most hopeful and hopeless word in the medical vocabulary. "Blood work from this morning looks good, doctor. Morrison wants to adjust her muscle relaxant dosage, but otherwise, no changes." "No changes," Daniel nodded. In this room, in this situation, no changes counted as a victory. Brenda left, her footsteps soft on the linoleum, and Daniel settled deeper into the chair. He had until 7:15 before he needed to leave for the second pickup of the evening. Lily's gymnastics class ended at 7:30, and Mrs. Chen had agreed to cover drop-off but not pickup. And the whole elaborate schedule depended on Daniel hitting every checkpoint within his precisely calculated windows. "I've been thinking about that trip we talked about," he said to Sarah. "Before the accident, remember? You wanted to take Lily to that dude ranch in Montana, teach her to ride horses. You said every kid should know what it feels like to be terrified of something beautiful." He smiled, though his chest ached. "I looked it up yesterday. The place is still running. They have a week-long family package in July. I was thinking maybe, I know you can't come, but I could take pictures, video, tell you about it. It's stupid, probably, but..." His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Mrs. Chen confirming Lily was fed and doing homework. He fired back a quick thank you text and pocketed the phone. "Where was I? Right, Montana. The thing is, Sarah, I don't know how to do this without you. I don't mean the logistics. I've got those down. I can pack Lily's lunch and braid her hair and help with math homework. I can keep the apartment clean and pay the bills on time and make sure she gets to school and gymnastics and play dates. But the big stuff. How to teach her to be kind when the world is cruel. How to help her understand why her mom can't be there for her 8th birthday or her first day of 4th grade. How to explain that love doesn't end just because someone can't talk back anymore." He paused, his voice dropping. "I'm winging it, love. Every single day. And I'm terrified I'm screwing it all up. But yeah." Sarah's chest rose and fell with mechanical regularity. The machines hummed. The sun continued its slow descent toward the horizon. Daniel sat with her for another hour, talking about nothing and everything. Lily's upcoming science fair project, the weird smell in the apartment building's stairwell, the way the barista at the coffee shop near his office had finally stopped asking if he wanted to add a shot of vanilla to his order, the mundane architecture of a life built around absence. At 7:14, he stood and carefully released her hand, arranging it back on the blanket in the exact position he'd found it. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, leaning down to press his lips to her forehead. Her skin was warm, alive. Just somewhere else. "I love you, Sarah Carter. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. That's the deal. That's the promise." He picked up his bag and left, closing the door gently behind him. Evelyn Harper's first week as CEO of Carter & Hayes. Financial consisted of back-to-back meetings with people who smiled too much, spreadsheets that revealed more problems than solutions, and the growing realization that her predecessor had been coasting on reputation for at least 18 months before his retirement. She'd taken the job because she was good at fixing broken things. At 30 years old, she'd already turned around 2 failing divisions and earned a reputation as someone who could walk into chaos and emerge with clarity. Carter & Hayes wasn't broken, exactly. It was profitable, well-regarded, stable, but it was also stagnant. The board wanted growth. The shareholders wanted innovation. And Evelyn wanted to prove that the whispers about her being too young, too ambitious, too female could all be silenced with the right numbers in the right columns. By Friday afternoon of her first week, she'd identified the key players. Marcus Webb, talented but political, more interested in being liked than being right. Jennifer Sosa, brilliant with derivatives but terrible with people. Paula Corelli, steady, reliable, would never set the world on fire, but would also never burn the building down. And then there was Daniel Carter. Evelyn had noticed him in her first meeting, the department briefing where everyone presented their current projects. Daniel had delivered his update in exactly 7 minutes, clear, concise, backed by data that demonstrated he understood not just the numbers, but the narrative behind them. His analysis of the Greenfield merger had been sharper than anything she'd seen from analysts with twice his tenure. When she'd asked a follow-up question, he'd answered without hesitation, without ego, without trying to impress her. Then at 5:30 exactly, he'd closed his laptop and left. "What's Carter's story?" she asked Marcus that evening, catching him as he headed out around 8. She'd made a point of learning who stayed late. Those were usually the ambitious ones, the ones she could leverage into higher performance. Marcus had laughed. "Carter? Man's a ghost. Brilliant analyst, maybe the best we've got. But he's got zero interest in moving up. Turns down every promotion, skips every social event, and disappears at 5:30 like the building's on fire. Been here 6 years, and I don't think he's stayed past 6 even once." "Family obligations?" Evelyn asked. "Daughter, I think. Single dad situation. Look, he does good work, consistent. But if you're thinking of grooming him for senior analyst or team lead, save your breath. People have tried." Evelyn nodded, filing the information away. In her experience, people who avoided promotion either lacked ambition or were hiding something. Daniel Carter didn't strike her as lazy, which meant there was a story there. She started paying attention. Monday, 5:30. Daniel Carter closed his laptop mid-email and left. Tuesday, 5:30. Daniel Carter saved a document Jennifer had been struggling with, sent it to her with a brief note of explanation, and left. Wednesday, 5:30. Daniel Carter finished a presentation for Paul's client meeting the next morning, declined an invitation to join the team for drinks, and left. Thursday. Evelyn decided to test a theory. At 5:15, she appeared at Daniel's desk with a stack of folders. "Carter, I need your eyes on something. The Meridian account projections are off, and I can't figure out why. Can you take a look?" Daniel glanced at the clock, 5:16, and then back at her. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. "I can look at it first thing tomorrow, 8 a.m.? "It's urgent," Evelyn pressed, watching him carefully. "Shouldn't take more than an hour. Then Marcus or Jennifer could handle it," Daniel said, his tone polite but immovable. "They're both still here. I'll send you an email with my preliminary thoughts tonight, but I really need to go." He was already standing, already reaching for his jacket. "Mr. Carter, I'm sorry, Miss Harper. Emergency at home. I'll follow up tomorrow." He was gone before she could formulate a response, leaving her standing at his empty desk with an armful of folders and the distinct impression that she'd just been politely but firmly dismissed. Nobody dismissed Evelyn Harper. "Is that normal?" she asked Jennifer, who was watching the exchange with poorly concealed amusement. That's Daniel, Jennifer said. He's like a pumpkin. Turns into a non-responsive vegetable at 5:31. Evelyn returned to her office, set down the folders, and pulled up Daniel Carter's personnel file on her computer. The basics were unremarkable. 32 years old, bachelor's degree in finance from a state school, hired 6 years ago as a junior analyst, promoted to mid-level 3 years ago. No further advancement. Performance reviews were consistently excellent. He'd been offered senior analyst positions 4 times in the past 2 years. He'd declined all of them. No disciplinary issues. No complaints, no red flags. But no life either. No volunteer committees, no mentorship roles, no networking groups. He came in at 8:15 every morning and left at 5:30 every evening. And in between, he did exceptional work that no one could ever fault. Evelyn drummed her fingers on the desk. 6 years of invisible excellence. 6 years of refusal to engage with anything beyond the bare minimum of his job description. 6 years of being exactly good enough and absolutely no better. She pulled up his emergency contact information. One name, Margaret Carter. Relationship, mother. No spouse listed, no partner. Nothing about a daughter, though Marcus had mentioned one. On impulse, Evelyn opened a new search window and typed Daniel Carter's name into LinkedIn. His profile was bare bones, current position, education, and nothing else. No recommendations, no network connections beyond the required minimum. She tried Facebook next, though she knew it was borderline unethical to cyberstalk her employees. His profile was locked down, only a profile picture visible. Daniel with a young girl on his shoulders, both of them laughing, the girl's dark hair flying in the wind. The daughter, maybe 8 or 9 years old. The photo was at least a year old, based on the metadata. Evelyn closed the browser, feeling vaguely guilty. She wasn't some stalker boss trying to dig up dirt on her employees. She just needed to understand the people she was leading, especially the ones who could be assets if properly motivated. Daniel Carter was an asset. He just didn't seem to know it. She made a note to schedule a one-on-one with him next week. Whatever was going on in his personal life, whatever reason he had for checking out at 5:30 sharp, she could work with it. Everyone had a lever. Everyone had something they wanted. Her job was to find it and pull. One. Friday evening, Daniel made it to the care center at 5:52, which was later than he liked, but still within acceptable parameters. Lily's spring break started next week, which meant recalibrating the entire schedule. No school pickups, but all-day coverage needed. And Mrs. Chen had already warned him she had plans Tuesday through Thursday. He'd have to take PTO, which he almost never did, which would raise questions. He signed in at the desk. Ramon was off, replaced by a younger guy Daniel didn't recognize, and headed up to room 307. Sarah looked the same. She always looked the same. And yet Daniel always scanned her face for changes, some microscopic shift that might indicate she was finding her way back from wherever her mind had retreated after the accident. 3 years ago, Sarah had been driving home from her sister's place in Connecticut. Lily had been with Daniel at a father-daughter event at the school. It was raining. A truck driver, later determined to be texting while driving, had crossed the median on the Hutchinson River Parkway and hit Sarah's car head-on at 60 miles per hour. The truck driver walked away with a broken collarbone. Sarah's skull had fractured in 3 places. She'd been in a coma ever since. Not brain dead. The doctors were very clear about that. Severe traumatic brain injury with diffuse axonal damage. Some patients recovered. Some didn't. There was no way to know. All they could do was wait and provide supportive care and hope. Daniel had stopped hoping mostly. Hope required energy he didn't have. But he'd never stopped visiting. Never stopped talking to her. Never stopped honoring the vows he'd made 8 years ago. In sickness and in health, till death do us part. Sarah wasn't dead, so the vows still held. Lily wants to go to Emma Rodriguez's birthday party next Saturday, he told her, settling into his chair. It's at one of those trampoline places. I said yes, obviously, but I'm a little concerned about her ankle. She rolled it at gymnastics last month, and I don't think it's fully healed, even though she swears it is. You know how she is, tough like her mom, stubborn like her mom. Terrible liar like her mom. He smiled, remembering the time Sarah had tried to throw him a surprise party and accidentally blurted out every single detail 2 weeks in advance because she was physically incapable of keeping secrets. The new CEO started this week, he continued. Evelyn Harper. Young, maybe 30, very focused, very Intense. She tried to get me to stay late yesterday. I said no, obviously, and I think I pissed her off. Marcus said she's here to shake things up, push for growth, all that corporate speak nonsense. I'm hoping if I keep my head down and my work clean, she'll focus on someone else. The machines hummed. A cart rattled past in the hallway. Somewhere down the corridor, a television played a game show at too loud volume. I miss you, Daniel said quietly. I know I say that every time, but I do. I miss you when Lily asks me questions I don't know how to answer. I miss you when I burn dinner because I was trying to do too many things at once. I miss you at night when the apartment's quiet and I can't remember what your voice sounds like anymore. I miss you every single day, Sarah, but I'm not giving up. I promised you forever, and forever doesn't come with an escape clause. He sat with her until 7 o'clock, then kissed her forehead and headed back into the city. Monday morning, Evelyn's assistant informed her that Daniel Carter had agreed to meet at 2 p.m. in her office. Evelyn spent the morning in back-to-back meetings with the leadership team, then grabbed a salad at her desk and prepared for the conversation. Her goal was simple: figure out what motivated Daniel Carter and leverage it into higher performance. If he was as talented as his work suggested, he should be running his own team by now, maybe even positioning himself for VP track. The fact that he wasn't meant either, he lacked confidence or he was deliberately limiting himself. Either way, Evelyn could fix it. Daniel knocked at exactly 2 o'clock and entered when she called. He looked like he always did, neat but not flashy. Dark slacks and a button-down shirt, no tie, that same messenger bag slung over one shoulder. Mr. Carter, thanks for making time. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Please sit. He sat, his posture relaxed but alert, hands folded in his lap, waiting. I've been reviewing performance across the department, Evelyn began, and your work consistently stands out. Your analysis is sharp, your attention to detail is excellent, and from what I can see, you're one of the most reliable people on the team. Thank you, Daniel said neutrally. So I'm curious why you've turned down 4 promotion opportunities in the past 2 years. Daniel's expression didn't change. The role I have now suits my needs. Your needs, Evelyn repeated. Can you elaborate on that? I have personal obligations that require a consistent schedule, Daniel said. Senior analyst positions typically require longer hours and more flexibility. I can't provide that. What if we could work around your schedule, adjust expectations to accommodate? With respect, Ms. Harper, we can't. Daniel's tone remained polite, but there was steel underneath. I appreciate the interest in my career development, but I'm not looking to advance. I'm good at my current job. My current job works with my life, and I'd like to keep doing it. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, studying him. Most people, when offered promotion, either jumped at the opportunity or apologized profusely for being unable to accept. Daniel Carter did neither. He simply stated facts and expected her to accept them. You have a daughter, she said, switching tactics. How old? Something shifted in Daniel's face, not quite defensiveness, but a subtle closing off. 8. And you're raising her alone? I'm managing, Daniel said. Is there something specific about my work performance that concerns you? On the contrary, your work is excellent. I'm just trying to understand my team. My personal life doesn't affect my professional output. Daniel checked his watch, a quick, unconscious gesture. Is there anything else you need? I have a meeting with Paul at 2:30. You don't, Evelyn thought. Paul's in a client call until 3. You're lying to get out of this conversation. Just one more question, she said. What would it take for you to consider a leadership role? If money's an issue, it's not about money. Daniel stood. I'm sorry, Ms. Harper. I know you're trying to help, but there's nothing you can offer me that's more important than what I already have. I hope you can respect that. He left before she could respond, closing the door with careful precision behind him. Evelyn sat in her office, staring at the closed door, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. She'd been dismissed again, politely, professionally, but absolutely. Daniel Carter, she decided, was either the most frustratingly principled person she'd ever met or the most maddeningly stubborn, possibly both. She pulled up his file again, looking for something she'd missed. Emergency contact Margaret Carter, no spouse, no partner. But Marcus had mentioned single dad, which meant there had been someone once. A mother who was no longer in the picture. Divorce, maybe. Or death. Evelyn picked up her phone and dialed Marcus's extension. Webb? Marcus, it's Evelyn. Quick question about Daniel Carter. Do you know what happened to his daughter's mother? A pause. Why are you asking? Because I'm trying to understand why one of my best analysts refuses every opportunity for advancement, and I think it has something to do with his personal situation. Another pause, longer this time. Look, I don't know the full story, but I heard from someone who heard from someone else that his wife was in some kind of accident a few years back. Bad accident. I don't think she made it. Like I said, rumors. Carter doesn't talk about his personal life, ever. Thanks, Evelyn said, and hung up. She pulled up a new search window and typed carefully, Sarah Carter, Accident New York 2022. Then stopped, her finger hovering over the enter key. This was crossing a line. Whatever Daniel Carter's story was, it was his to tell or not tell. She had no business digging through what was clearly a tragedy. She closed the search window without completing it. But she didn't forget the conversation. And she didn't stop noticing that Daniel Carter left every single day at 5:30 sharp, no exceptions, no explanations. Whatever he was protecting, it mattered more than anything else in his life. Evelyn found herself respecting that, even as it frustrated the hell out of her. 2 weeks into her tenure at Carter and Hayes, Evelyn Harper had successfully pissed off 3 board members, reorganized 2 departments, and discovered that the company's expense reporting system was held together with what amounted to digital duct tape and prayer. She'd also become quietly obsessed with Daniel Carter's 30 departures, which annoyed her more than she cared to admit. She told herself it was professional interest. A talented employee limiting his potential was a waste of resources. But if she was honest, and Evelyn prided herself on brutal honesty, at least with herself, it was more than that. Daniel Carter had told her no, twice. And in Evelyn's experience, people who said no either had something to hide or something to protect. She was beginning to suspect it was both. On a Thursday afternoon in late March, she found herself working late again, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the route she took leaving the office. Instead of heading directly to the parking garage, she walked past Daniel's desk, empty since 5:31, naturally, and noticed something she'd missed before. Tucked beside his monitor was a single photograph in a simple black frame. A young girl with dark hair and an enormous smile, missing her 2 front teeth, holding up a trophy that was almost as big as her torso. Evelyn leaned closer, studying the image. The girl looked maybe 7 in the photo, which meant she'd be 8 or 9 now, same age as Daniel had mentioned. The trophy had a small plaque that was just barely readable in the photograph. First place, Regional Gymnastics Level 3. A gymnast's daughter. That explained the 5:30 exits, at least partially. Classes, training, competitions. Single parents had to work around those schedules. Evelyn had grown up with a single mother who'd worked 2 jobs to keep them housed and fed. She understood sacrifice in abstract terms, even if she'd never made those particular sacrifices herself. But something about the photo nagged at her. It wasn't just pride in the frame, it was positioned at an angle where Daniel would see it constantly while working. A deliberate placement that suggested the girl wasn't just part of his life, but the entire center of it. Looking for something? Evelyn straightened, turning to find Jennifer Sosa emerging from the file room with an armload of binders. Jennifer raised an eyebrow, her expression more amused than accusatory. Just working late, Evelyn said smoothly. You? Same. Though unlike our fearless leader, I actually go home eventually. Jennifer dumped the binders on her own desk with a thud. You're trying to figure out Carter, aren't you? I'm trying to figure out why my best analyst refuses to advance. Because his kid matters more than his career. Jennifer said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Some people are built that way. They've got priorities that don't fit on a performance review. Everyone has priorities, Evelyn countered. That doesn't mean they can't also be ambitious. Jennifer laughed, a sharp sound without much humor. You really don't know, do you? Know what? About his wife. Jennifer hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Look, I don't know the full story. Carter keeps his personal life locked down tighter than Fort Knox. But about 3 years ago, there was an accident, car crash. His wife was... Well, she didn't make it, from what I understand. Left him alone with a young kid and a job that requires actual human interaction, which he's clearly terrible at. Evelyn felt something twist in her chest. That's tragic. Yeah, it is. Jennifer picked up one of the binders, flipping through it without really seeing the contents. After it happened, Carter took a month off, maybe 6 weeks. When he came back, he was different, quieter, more focused, and he started leaving at 5:30 exactly, every single day, no exceptions. People tried to be understanding at first, but eventually it just became who he was. The guy who does great work and goes home on time. End of story. How do you know all this? I don't really. Office gossip mostly. Carter never talks about it, never mentions his wife, never even says her name. It's like she existed and then she didn't, and he just kept going. Jennifer paused. Or maybe he didn't keep going. Maybe he's just stuck. Evelyn thought about that later, driving home through Manhattan traffic that moved like congealed blood through narrow arteries. Stuck. It was a good word for what she'd observed in Daniel Carter. A man performing the motions of life without actually living it. Coming to work, doing his job excellently, and then disappearing into whatever private grief he'd constructed for himself. She should leave it alone. It wasn't her business. Daniel's performance was fine, his work was excellent, and his personal tragedy, however awful, didn't affect his professional output. But Evelyn had never been good at leaving things alone. The next morning, she did something she knew was questionable at best and potentially invasive at worst. She called her former college roommate, Lisa, who worked in medical records at a hospital network that covered most of the New York area. I need a favor, Evelyn said, skipping the pleasantries. And before you say no, I know it's borderline unethical. Jesus, Evelyn, what now? I need to know if there's a patient named Sarah Carter in any long-term care facility in the New York area. She would have been admitted about 3 years ago. Car accident, severe injuries. A long pause. Are you serious right now? Completely. Why? Because I think one of my employees is trapped in a situation he can't get out of, and I need to understand what I'm dealing with before I can help. Or you could just ask him. He won't tell me. Trust me, I've tried. Another pause, longer this time. If I do this, you didn't hear it from me, and you owe me, big time. Done. It took Lisa 3 days. When she called back, her voice was careful. Found her, Sarah Michelle Carter, age 32, admitted to Lenox Hill Care Center 3 years ago following a motor vehicle accident on the Hutchinson River Parkway. Severe traumatic brain injury. She's been in a persistent vegetative state since admission. Evelyn's hand tightened on her phone. She's alive? Technically, brain activity is minimal. She requires full supportive care, feeding tube, breathing assistance, the works. According to the notes, there's been no significant change in her condition since admission. Prognosis is, unclear. And her husband visits? Can't tell you that from the records. But if he's listed as primary contact and decision maker, I'd assume so. Lisa's voice softened. Evelyn, what are you doing? I'm not sure yet, Evelyn admitted. Well, figure it out and don't do anything stupid. Evelyn hung up and sat in her office, staring at nothing. Sarah Carter wasn't dead. She was suspended somewhere between alive and gone, existing in a twilight state that must be its own special kind of torture for everyone who loved her. And Daniel Carter visited. Of course he did. That's where he went every night at 5:31, rushing out of the office like his life depended on it. Because, in a way, it did. Evelyn pulled up Daniel's file again, reading through his performance reviews with new context. 6 years of excellent work. 3 years of refusing every advancement opportunity. 3 years of leaving exactly on time, every time, to visit a wife who couldn't speak, couldn't respond, couldn't acknowledge his presence. Most people would have moved on by now. Grief counseling, time, the gentle pressure from friends and family to start living again. Most people would have accepted that sometimes love ends not with a choice, but with circumstances beyond anyone's control. Daniel Carter apparently was not most people. Evelyn closed the file and made a decision she'd probably regret later. She was going to Lenox Hill Care Center, not to confront Daniel, not to intrude on his private grief, just to understand. just to see what kind of situation required a man to freeze his entire life in place for 3 years. Just to witness what devotion looked like when it had nowhere to go but forward. The care center sat on East 77th Street, a modest building wedged between more affluent neighbors, its brick facade suggesting quiet dignity rather than institutional sterility. Evelyn arrived on a Friday evening at 6 o'clock after making sure Daniel had already left the office at his usual time. She had no plan, no script, just a growing need to understand the man who'd said no to her twice and meant it both times. The lobby was clean but worn, the kind of place where budgets stretched to cover necessities but rarely luxuries. A security guard sat behind a desk, barely glancing up as Evelyn approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to visit a patient, Sarah Carter, room 307. The guard consulted his log. "Are you family?" "Friend?" Evelyn lied smoothly. "I just heard she was here. I've been out of the country and wanted to stop by." "No, Mom, man." The guard studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "Sign in here. Visiting hours end at 8. Evelyn signed a false name and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The corridor smelled like industrial cleaner and something else underneath, the particular scent of bodies that no longer moved on their own, fed through tubes and cleaned by strangers. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, just deeply sad. Room 307 was at the end of the hall. The door was open. Evelyn paused outside, suddenly uncertain. This was an invasion, a violation. She had no right to be here, no justification beyond her own inability to leave things alone. She looked inside anyway. The room was small but bright, afternoon sun slanting through partially open blinds. A woman lay in the hospital bed, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her hands resting at her sides. She looked peaceful, young, like she might open her eyes at any moment and ask what everyone was staring at. But she didn't. She just lay there, her chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity. While machines monitored functions her body could no longer manage independently. A nurse entered from the other side, checking the IV line and making notes on a tablet. She glanced at Evelyn and smiled politely. "Here to see Sarah?" "Yes," Evelyn said, the lie coming easier now. "I'm an old friend. Just wanted to stop by." "That's nice. She doesn't get many visitors besides her husband." The nurse adjusted the blanket covering Sarah's legs. "He's here every day, though, like clockwork, 5:30 to 7, never misses. Been doing it for 3 years straight. Every day." Evelyn felt something cold settle in her stomach. "That's remarkable." "It is. Most families drift away after the first year or so. Not Mr. Carter, though. He talks to her like she's right there with him, tells her about their daughter, about his day, about everything. It's heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time." The nurse finished her notes and smiled again. "I'll give you some privacy. Press the call button if you need anything." "Oches." Evelyn stood alone in the room with Sarah Carter, who wasn't really there at all. She moved closer to the bed, studying the woman's face. Pretty, even in stillness. Probably beautiful when animated by personality and life. Young, only 32, which meant she'd been Daniel's age or close to it. They'd probably met in college, or maybe just after. Built a life together. Had a daughter. Made plans for a future that included growing old and watching their kid graduate and becoming grandparents someday. And then a truck driver had texted while driving and erased all of it in a single moment of stupid, preventable carelessness. Evelyn had seen tragedy before. Her father had died when she was 12. Sudden heart attack, no warning, just there one day and gone the next. She understood loss. But this was different. This was loss that refused to complete itself. A grief that couldn't resolve because the person you were grieving was technically still alive, still breathing, still taking up space in the world, even though they'd left it in every way that mattered. How did you move on from that? How did you let go of someone who was still, legally and medically, your wife? Still wearing her wedding ring, still listed as Sarah Carter instead of Sarah whatever her maiden name was, still existing in a state that made widow the wrong word and married a cruel joke? "I'm sorry," Evelyn said quietly to the woman who couldn't hear her. "I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry your husband can't let go. I'm sorry your daughter is growing up without you. I'm sorry for all of it." Sarah's chest rose and fell. The machines hummed. Nothing changed. Evelyn left the care center feeling like she'd seen something she wasn't supposed to witness. a private pain that she'd intruded on without permission. She also left with a new understanding of Daniel Carter that made her previous attempts to motivate him seem embarrassingly naive. You couldn't offer a man anything when the only thing he wanted was something you couldn't give him. You couldn't leverage ambition when ambition had been replaced by obligation. You couldn't promise growth when growth meant leaving someone behind. Daniel Carter had made his choice 3 years ago, and he made it again every single day at 5:30 p.m. Evelyn drove home and poured herself a glass of wine she didn't drink, staring out her apartment window at the Manhattan skyline. She'd built her entire adult life around achievement. College at 20, MBA at 23, VP at 27, CEO at 30. She'd sacrificed relationships, friendships, hobbies, anything that didn't directly contribute to her upward trajectory. She told herself it was worth it, that success meant something, that the corner office and the salary and the power to make decisions justified all the things she'd given up along the way. But Daniel Carter had given up success for something else entirely, and he didn't seem conflicted about it at all. Monday morning, Evelyn made a point of arriving at the office early. She wanted to catch Daniel before the day started, before meetings and deadlines crowded out actual conversation. She found him at his desk at 8:10, already working, a cup of coffee cooling beside his keyboard. "Mr. Carter, do you have a minute?" Daniel glanced up, his expression neutral. "Of course. My office?" He followed her without comment, closing the door behind him when she gestured for him to sit. Evelyn settled into her own chair, trying to figure out how to begin a conversation she had no business starting. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. "For what?" "For pushing you about promotions, for assuming I knew what was best for your career, for not respecting your boundaries when you made them very clear." She paused. "You were right. There are things more important than advancement." Daniel studied her, his expression unreadable. "What changed?" "Let's just say I gained some perspective on what sacrifice actually looks like." "I see." Daniel's voice was careful. "Ms. Harper, if someone told you about my personal situation—" "No one told me anything," Evelyn interrupted, which was technically true. I'm observant, and I realized I was being insensitive." Daniel relaxed slightly. "I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, I don't think you were being insensitive, just ambitious. There's nothing wrong with that. There is if it comes at the cost of understanding the people you work with." Evelyn leaned forward. "I'm not going to ask about your personal life. That's your business. But I do want you to know that if you ever need flexibility, time off, schedule adjustments, anything, you can come to me. No judgment, no questions." "Thank you," Daniel said quietly. "That means more than you know." They sat in silence for a moment, and Evelyn realized this was the longest conversation they'd had that didn't involve spreadsheets or client accounts. Daniel looked tired up close, not exhausted, exactly, but worn in a way that suggested he'd been tired for so long he'd forgotten what rested felt like. "Can I ask you something?" Evelyn said. "And you can absolutely tell me it's none of my business. You can ask. Do you ever resent it, the choice you've made?" Daniel considered this question. "Every day," he said finally. "And never. Does that make sense?" "Not really. I resent that I have to choose it all. I resent that the world keeps spinning and expecting me to keep up when half of me is stuck in a moment 3 years ago. I resent that my daughter has to grow up with a father who's only half present because the other half is somewhere else doing something she's too young to fully understand." He paused. "But I don't resent the actual choice, because it's not really a choice. It's who I am. I made promises and I keep them, even when they're hard, especially when they're hard." "That's admirable," Evelyn said. "It's not admirable. It's just what you do when you love someone." Daniel stood. "Was there anything else?" "No, that's all." He left, and Evelyn sat alone in her office, thinking about promises and what happened when circumstances made them impossible to keep, but you tried anyway. She thought about her own life, the sacrifices she'd made in pursuit of success, and wondered if she'd ever loved anything, or anyone, enough to sacrifice success for it. She wasn't sure she had, and she wasn't sure if that was a failure or just a different kind of life. The week continued in its usual rhythm. Daniel arrived at 8:15 and left at 5:30, his work impeccable, his personal life invisible. Evelyn found herself watching him more carefully now, noticing small things she'd missed before. The way he kept his phone face up on his desk, always within reach. The way he checked it compulsively during meetings, not out of rudeness but readiness. The way he sometimes stared at nothing for a few seconds before refocusing, like he'd briefly left his body and traveled somewhere else. On Wednesday afternoon, Marcus stopped by Evelyn's office with a problem that wasn't really a problem, just an excuse to gossip. "Did you hear Carter actually snapped at someone yesterday?" Evelyn looked up from her computer. "Snapped? How? Nay?" Paul asked him to stay late to finish the Greenfield analysis. Carter said no, usual routine. But Paul pushed, said it was urgent, said the client needed it by morning, and Carter just shut him down. Said if it was that urgent, Paul should have planned better. Then he left at 5:30 anyway. Was Paul angry? More confused than angry. Carter's never been rude before. Always polite, always professional, but yesterday it was like something snapped. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, saying, "I think he's burning out. 3 years of this routine, never deviating, never taking a break. It's got to catch up with you eventually." Evelyn made a non-committal sound. Evelyn. "Did the Greenfield analysis get done?" Carter emailed it at midnight. Finished it at home, I guess. Perfect work, as always. But still. Marcus shrugged. Guy needs a vacation, or therapy, or something. After Marcus left, Evelyn pulled up Daniel's PTO records. In 6 years at the company, he'd taken exactly 8 vacation days. 3 of them had been the week his wife was in the accident. The other 5 were scattered across 3 years, always single days, never more than 1 at a time. He had 96 hours of unused vacation time accrued, which would max out at the end of the fiscal year and start disappearing if he didn't use it. She drafted an email, deleted it, drafted another one, finally settled on something simple. "Mr. Carter, I noticed you have significant unused PTO. Company policy requires you to use or lose anything over 120 hours. Please submit a vacation request for at least 1 week before June 30th. This is not optional." EH? She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Daniel's response came 10 minutes later. "Ms. Harper, understood. I'll submit a request for the first week of June. Thank you for the reminder." DC Kurt, professional, and clearly annoyed, though he was too polite to show it directly. Evelyn wondered what Daniel Carter did with vacation time, when vacation meant 7 consecutive days of a routine he'd built his entire life around. Did he visit his wife twice a day instead of once? Did he take his daughter somewhere and pretend they were a normal family? Did he sit in his apartment and stare at walls, counting down the hours until he could return to work and the structured schedule that kept him from falling apart? She told herself it wasn't her problem. She'd done her job as a manager, reminded an employee about company policy, ensured compliance with HR requirements. What he did with his time off was his business. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. Thursday evening, Evelyn worked late again, which had become her default mode. At 7 o'clock, she stretched, closed her laptop, and decided to grab dinner at the Italian place near her apartment. The restaurant was crowded, couples and families filling most of the tables, the noise level suggesting celebration rather than routine. She was waiting for her takeout order when she saw him. Daniel Carter sat in the back corner booth with a young girl. His daughter, obviously, the same dark hair and bright energy from the photograph on his desk. They were playing some kind of card game, the girl laughing as Daniel pretended to be confused about the rules. There was a half-eaten pizza between them and 2 sodas, and for a moment, they looked like any normal father and daughter having dinner together. Then Evelyn noticed the time. 7:15, which meant Daniel had done his usual 5:30 departure, visited his wife for 90 minutes, picked up his daughter from wherever she spent the late afternoons, and brought her here for dinner. All precisely scheduled, all carefully orchestrated, all designed to maintain the illusion that their life was normal. The girl said something that made Daniel laugh, a genuine laugh, unguarded and full, and Evelyn felt something twist in her chest. This was what Daniel Carter was protecting. Not just a promise to a woman in a coma, but a childhood for a girl who'd already lost her mother once. He was trying to give his daughter normalcy in a situation that was anything but normal, trying to be present and engaged while carrying a grief that would have crushed most people. Evelyn collected her takeout and left before they could see her. She ate alone in her apartment, tasting nothing, thinking about the different ways people built their lives and what they chose to sacrifice along the way. Friday afternoon, Paul Eccarelli knocked on her office door, looking uncomfortable. "Got a minute?" "Of course." "What's wrong?" Paul sat, his hands folded in his lap. "It's about Daniel Carter. Look, I know you've been interested in his situation, and I think there's something you should know." Evelyn waited. His wife's medical bills are insane. Catastrophic. She's been in that facility for 3 years with round-the-clock care. His insurance covered maybe 40%. The rest is out of pocket. Paul pulled out his phone and showed her a number. "I saw his last pay stub by accident. It was on the printer and I grabbed it thinking it was mine. He's got a garnishment. They're taking 30% of his paycheck for medical debt." Evelyn stared at the number. It was staggering. "How is he surviving?" "I don't know. Maybe family help. Maybe he's got savings. Maybe he's drowning and just doesn't show it." Paul pocketed his phone. "I felt weird knowing this and not telling you. He'd kill me if he knew I was talking about it. But I thought you should know what you're dealing with." After Paul left, Evelyn sat very still, processing. Daniel Carter wasn't just sacrificing his career advancement for his wife. He was sacrificing everything: time, money, energy, any chance at a life beyond the narrow parameters he'd constructed. And he was doing it without complaint, without asking for help, without even acknowledging it was happening. She opened her laptop and pulled up the company's benefits information. There had to be something she could do. Some policy, some program, some way to ease the burden without making it obvious she was interfering. She found it in the Employee Assistance Program, a discretionary fund for employees facing extreme hardship. It required CEO approval, which meant it required her approval. Evelyn drafted the paperwork, citing Daniel's exemplary work record and the extenuating circumstances without going into specific details. She allocated $50,000 from the fund to cover medical expenses, structured as a one-time grant rather than a loan. Then she flagged it as confidential and routed it through HR with instructions that Daniel be notified by mail at his home address, not at work. It wasn't enough. It wouldn't solve the problem, but it might buy him some breathing room, some space to exist without the constant pressure of debt crushing down on top of grief. She signed the approval and sent it through before she could talk herself out of it. That night, lying in bed and staring at her ceiling, Evelyn wondered when she'd become the kind of person who interfered in other people's lives without permission. She told herself it was good management, investing in employees, supporting them through difficult times, ensuring their personal crises didn't impact their professional output. But deep down, she knew it was something else. She was watching Daniel Carter navigate an impossible situation with more grace than she'd ever managed in her easiest moments. And some part of her needed to do something, anything, to acknowledge that. Or maybe she just needed to believe that devotion like his still existed in the world. That not everyone measured success by titles and salaries. That some people kept promises even when the universe gave them every excuse to break them. Daniel Carter had said no to her twice. And in doing so, he'd taught her something she'd spent 30 years avoiding. Some things mattered more than winning. The letter arrived at Daniel's apartment on a Tuesday morning in mid-April, forwarded through the HR department with a confidential stamp that made his stomach drop before he even opened it. Letters from work that came to his home address were never good news. They were disciplinary actions or benefits changes or some other bureaucratic knife waiting to twist. He opened it standing in his kitchen while Lily ate cereal at the table, her legs swinging beneath her chair as she narrated something about a girl at school who could do a backflip on the balance beam. The first paragraph made him read it twice. The second paragraph made him sit down. "Dear Mr. Carter, you have been selected to receive a one-time hardship grant from the Carter and Hayes Employee Assistance Fund in the amount of $50,000. This grant is awarded in recognition of your exemplary service and to provide support during extenuating personal circumstances. The funds will be dispersed directly to outstanding medical creditors, as indicated in your benefits file. No repayment is required. This matter is confidential and will not be disclosed to your immediate supervisors or colleagues. For questions, please contact Human Resources." Daniel stared at the letter until the words stopped making sense. $50,000. A hardship grant. Confidential. No repayment required. Someone knew. Someone had looked into his life, seen the wreckage he'd been carefully concealing, and decided to intervene. And there was only one person at Carter and Hayes with both the authority and the motivation to do something like this. Dad, you okay? He looked up. Lily was watching him with those dark eyes that saw too much, that had learned too young to read adult expressions for signs of crisis. I'm fine, sweetheart, just work stuff. He folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket. Finish your breakfast. We need to leave in 10 minutes. But he wasn't fine. He was furious and grateful and humiliated all at once. A cocktail of emotions he didn't have time to process because Lily needed to get to school and he needed to get to work. And the machines in room 307 needed to keep humming because Sarah couldn't breathe on her own anymore. He dropped Lily at school, drove to the office, and went straight to Evelyn Harper's floor without stopping at his own desk. Her assistant tried to intercept him. She's in a meeting. But Daniel walked past her and knocked once before opening the door. Evelyn was alone, reading something on her laptop. She looked up, startled, then waved her assistant away and closed the door behind Daniel. Mr. Carter, is something wrong? Daniel pulled the letter from his pocket and set it on her desk. Did you do this? Evelyn glanced at the letter without touching it. The Employee Assistance Fund is administered through HR. I don't involve myself in individual cases. That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting. She leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. If you received a hardship grant, it's because you qualified for one. That's all. I didn't apply for anything. The fund is discretionary. Applications aren't required. Her voice softened slightly. Daniel, if you need help, there's no shame in accepting it. I don't need help. I need privacy. He heard how harsh that sounded and tried to moderate his tone. I appreciate whatever you did. I do, but I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask anyone to look into my life or make decisions about what I need. No one looked into your life, Evelyn said calmly. Your medical debt is on file with benefits. The garnishment on your paycheck is a matter of record. I didn't need to investigate anything. The information was already there. Daniel felt the fight drain out of him. She was right, of course. He'd filled out all the forms himself, disclosed everything HR required, signed away his privacy the day he'd asked the company insurance to cover Sarah's catastrophic injuries. He'd just assumed no one actually looked at those files, that his personal disaster was buried in some database where it couldn't embarrass anyone. Why? He asked quietly. Because you do excellent work, and you're drowning. Because the company has resources specifically for situations like this, and it seemed wasteful not to use them. She paused. Because you shouldn't have to choose between keeping your wife alive and keeping your lights on. Daniel sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk. You went to see her, didn't you, Sarah? Evelyn didn't deny it. I did, last week. I'm sorry. I know that was an invasion of your privacy. Why would you do that? Because I didn't understand, Evelyn said simply. And I needed to. They sat in silence for a moment. Daniel tried to summon the anger he'd felt reading the letter, but it wouldn't come. Instead, he just felt tired. Bone deep, 3 years running tired. She's not going to wake up, he said. The doctors won't say it directly, but that's what all the careful language means. Minimal brain activity, extensive diffuse damage, poor prognosis for meaningful recovery. They're telling me she's gone without actually saying she's dead. But you don't believe them. I believe them. I just don't care. Daniel rubbed his face. Do you know what the hardest part is? It's not the medical bills or the schedule or raising Lily alone. It's knowing that everyone thinks I'm crazy, that I should pull the plug and move on, that I'm wasting my life on someone who's already gone. I don't think you're crazy, Evelyn said. You should. It would be more rational. Rationality is overrated. She tapped her pen against the desk, a nervous gesture that surprised him. Evelyn Harper didn't seem like someone who got nervous. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is extraordinary. Misguided, maybe, but extraordinary. It's not extraordinary. It's just marriage. You don't get to quit when things get hard. Most people do, though, Evelyn pointed out. Most people reach a point where they decide they've done enough. where they choose their own survival over someone else's. Then most people are wrong. Daniel stood. Thank you for the grant, or for not being involved in the grant. Whichever story we're going with, I should get back to work. Daniel. Evelyn's use of his first name stopped him at the door. The vacation time you requested in June, do you have plans? Not really. Lily's school ends the third week of June, so I'll be home with her that week. That's all. You should take her somewhere. Make some memories that aren't about hospitals and gymnastics classes and holding everything together. Maybe, Daniel said, knowing he wouldn't. Knowing that a week away meant 7 days of Sarah lying in that room with no one to talk to her, no one to hold her hand, no one to remind her that she was still someone's wife. He couldn't do that, not even for Lily. He left before Evelyn could read that decision on his face. The $50,000 cleared his largest creditor by the end of the month. Daniel received a notification that his wage garnishment had been reduced by 60%, which meant an extra $800 in his next paycheck. $800 that felt simultaneously like a fortune and a drop in the ocean compared to what Sarah's care still cost him monthly. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt exposed, like someone had reached into his carefully constructed life and rearranged the furniture while he wasn't looking. The money helped, objectively, materially, but it also meant Evelyn Harper knew. She'd seen Sarah, understood the impossible situation, and made a decision to intervene. Daniel didn't know how to feel about that except vaguely resentful and deeply grateful at the same time. May arrived with humidity and the kind of heat that made New York smell like garbage and ambition. Lily's school year wound toward its end with field trips and final projects, and a gymnastics recital that Daniel attended alone, clapping louder than anyone when she nailed her beam routine and stuck her vault landing. Afterward, Lily found him in the crowd of parents, her face flushed with pride and exertion. Did you see my round-off back handspring? I saw everything. You were amazing. He hugged her, not caring that she was sweaty and that other parents were watching. Your mom would have been so proud. Lily's smile faltered slightly. Do you think she knows? Like, even though she can't really, do you think she still knows things? Daniel knelt so they were eye level. I think she knows everything that matters. I think she knows you're brave and strong and the best kid in the entire world. I'm not a kid. I'm 8 3/4. Right, my mistake. He stood and took her hand. Come on, let's get ice cream before dinner. Dad, that's backward. I know. That's what makes it special. Mama? They got ice cream and ate it sitting on a bench near Central Park, watching tourists take selfies and street performers juggle flaming torches. And for a few minutes, Daniel let himself pretend they were a normal family, doing normal things. That Sarah would be waiting at home, ready to hear about Lily's recital, and complain that Daniel had ruined dinner by feeding their daughter dessert first. That the past 3 years had been a nightmare he could wake up from if he just tried hard enough. But the pretending never lasted. Reality always crept back in. The phone in his pocket with its calendar reminders. The time check that told him they needed to get moving if he wanted to make his evening visit to the care center. The weight of responsibility that never lifted no matter how much ice cream he bought. Dad? Lily was watching him with that too perceptive expression again. Are you happy? The question caught him off guard. Of course I'm happy. I've got you, don't I? But yeah, but are you happy? Like how Emma's dad is always laughing and making jokes and stuff? Daniel chose his words carefully. I'm happy in the ways that matter. I'm happy when you do well in school. I'm happy when I get to spend time with you. I'm happy knowing your mom is safe and cared for. Those are the important kinds of happy. But what about you? Just you? He didn't have an answer for that. The concept of happiness that existed independent of Lily or Sarah or the careful maintenance of their fractured family unit was so foreign he couldn't even visualize it. His life wasn't about his own happiness. It was about duty and love and promises kept even when they stopped making sense. Come on, he said instead of answering. We need to get you home for homework. It's Friday. I don't have homework on Friday. Then we need to get you home to avoid homework you definitely have and are lying about. Lily laughed, and the moment passed, and Daniel added it to the growing collection of questions his daughter asked that he couldn't answer honestly. At work, something shifted after the conversation in Evelyn's office. She stopped pushing him about promotions or leadership development or staying late. She also started appearing at odd moments, passing his desk and asking casual questions about Lily's school, mentioning articles she'd read about long-term care options, once even commenting that the weather was nice enough for a walk if he wanted to take a lunch break outside. Daniel wasn't sure what to make of it. It felt like she was trying to be friendly without quite knowing how friendship worked, like she'd decided he was worth understanding but hadn't figured out how to breach the walls he'd built around himself. On a Thursday in late May, she stopped by his desk at 4:45 with 2 cups of coffee. "Got a minute?" Daniel glanced at the clock, plenty of time before his 5:30 departure, and nodded. "Sure." Evelyn sat in the empty chair beside his desk, which was unusual. Conversations with the CEO typically happened in her office, not out in the open where everyone could see. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about marriage and not quitting when things get hard. And I realized I've never really understood what that means." "You've never been married?" "Once. Briefly. It lasted 18 months and ended when he told me I cared more about my career than I cared about him." She sipped her coffee. "He wasn't wrong." She sipped her. "That doesn't mean you were wrong," Daniel said. "Some people aren't built for that kind of compromise." "Is that what you think? That marriage is just one long compromise?" "Marriage is choosing someone every single day, even when you don't want to, even when it's hard, even when literally every other option looks easier." He paused. "Sarah and I had a fight the morning of the accident. Stupid argument about whether Lily should take piano lessons or stick with gymnastics. Sarah thought I was being overprotective. I thought she was pushing Lily too hard. We were both annoyed when she left for her sister's place. And then the call came. And suddenly that argument was the last real conversation we ever had." "That must haunt you every day." Daniel stared at his coffee. "But that's the thing about marriage. You don't get to cherry pick the good parts and ignore the rest. You get all of it. The fights and the making up, the boring Tuesday nights and the anniversary celebrations, the moments when you can't stand each other and the moments when you can't imagine life without them. And when half of that gets taken away, you don't just stop. You keep showing up. You keep choosing them, because that's what you promised." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it? The promise?" "Never." The answer came without hesitation. "I regret what happened. I regret the drunk driver and the rain and the fact that Sarah was even on that highway that night. But I don't regret loving her. I don't regret marrying her. And I don't regret staying. Even though it cost you everything?" "It doesn't cost me everything. It cost me some things. Career advancement, financial security, the theoretical possibility of moving on and finding someone else." He met her eyes. "But it gives me something too. It gives me the knowledge that I kept my word, that Lily can grow up knowing her father doesn't abandon people when things get difficult. That love isn't just something you feel, it's something you do, even when the feeling is buried under 3 years of exhaustion and medical bills." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I envy that. The certainty." "It's not certainty. I second-guess myself constantly. But I've made peace with the fact that there are no good options here. Only less bad ones. And staying, being present for Sarah, being present for Lily, trying to honor both commitments even though they're pulling me in different directions, that's the least bad option I can see." "What happens if she never wakes up? If you're still doing this in 5 years, 10 years?" Then I'm still doing it." Daniel's voice was steady. "That's the deal." Evelyn finished her coffee and stood. "You're either the most loyal person I've ever met or the most stubborn." "Probably both." She smiled, a real smile, not the professional one she wore in meetings. "For what it's worth, I think your daughter is lucky to have you, even if you are turning down promotions and leaving at 5:30 every day." "She deserves better than me," Daniel said quietly. "She deserves 2 parents and a normal childhood and a father who isn't always half present because the other half is in room 307 at Lenox Hill. Maybe, But she has you and you're trying. That counts for more than you think. After Evelyn left, Daniel sat at his desk thinking about certainty and whether he actually had any or whether he was just pretending hard enough that it looked like confidence from the outside. The truth was messier than what he'd told Evelyn. The truth was that some days he wanted to run. Some days he fantasized about walking away from all of it. The hospital visits and the medical bills and the grief that never resolved. Because the person you were grieving was still technically alive. Some days he looked at Lily and wondered if he was doing her more harm than good by modeling this kind of devotion, teaching her that love meant sacrifice to the point of self-destruction. But then he'd remember Sarah laughing at her own terrible jokes. Sarah dancing in their tiny apartment kitchen while cooking dinner. Sarah holding newborn Lily and crying because she was so happy and so terrified at the same time. He'd remember the woman he'd married, and he'd know he couldn't leave. Not because he was particularly noble or loyal, but because he genuinely couldn't imagine a version of himself that walked away. So he stayed. He kept showing up. He kept choosing the least bad option and hoping it was enough. The Friday before his mandatory vacation week, Daniel stayed late voluntarily for the first time in 3 years. Paul needed help with a presentation, and the deadline was Monday morning, and for once, the timing worked. Lily was at a sleepover at Emma Rodriguez's house, which meant Daniel had no pickup at gymnastics, no dinner to prepare, no homework to supervise. It felt strange being in the office at 6:30, then 7, then 7:30, like he'd stepped into a parallel universe where he was the person everyone expected him to be, engaged, committed, willing to put in extra hours for the good of the team. He still left at 8 o'clock to make his hospital visit, but Paul noticed. Marcus noticed. Jennifer noticed. "Welcome back to the land of the living," Marcus joked as Daniel packed up his laptop. "Thought you'd turn into a pumpkin at 5:31. Special circumstances," Daniel said. "Don't get used to it." But something had shifted. A hairline crack in the wall he'd built between his work life and his real life. Barely perceptible, but definitely there. He made it to Lenox Hill by 8:20, signed in with Ramon, who raised an eyebrow at the unusual timing, and headed up to room 307. Sarah looked the same. She always looked the same. But tonight, standing in the doorway and looking at his wife's still form, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in months. Anger. Not at Sarah. Never at Sarah. But at the unfairness of it all. At the truck driver who'd been texting about dinner plans while destroying their lives. At the universe that had let this happen. At the doctors who couldn't fix what was broken. At himself for not being able to fix it either. He crossed to her bedside and took her hand, his grip tighter than usual. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," he said, his voice low. "I'm trying, Sarah. I'm trying so hard to be enough for both of us. To be the father Lily needs and the husband you deserve and the employee they expect me to be. But I'm so tired. I'm tired of pretending I'm okay. I'm tired of carrying all of this alone. I'm tired of waiting for you to come back when I know you're not going to." Sarah's chest rose and fell with mechanical regularity. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Nothing changed. "I love you," Daniel continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I will always love you. But I need you to know that I'm barely holding it together. And if something doesn't change soon, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I can keep doing this for 5 more years, 10 more years, the rest of my life." He sat with her in this gathering darkness, not talking anymore, just holding her hand and trying to remember what hope felt like, trying to convince himself that staying was still the right choice, that the promise he'd made 8 years ago still meant something, even though the person he'd made it to was gone in every way that mattered. At 9 o'clock, a night nurse he didn't recognize came in to check Sarah's vitals. She smiled at Daniel with the kind of practiced sympathy healthcare workers developed when they spent too much time around tragedy. "You're here late tonight. Special circumstances," Daniel said, echoing what he'd told Marcus earlier. "She's lucky to have you. Most spouses stop visiting after the first year." Daniel wanted to tell her that luck had nothing to do with it, that Sarah wasn't lucky. She was trapped in a body that wouldn't die and a mind that had already left. That he wasn't some kind of saint. He was just stubborn and guilty and unable to imagine an alternative. But he just nodded and said, "Thanks," because it was easier than the truth. He left at 9:15, drove home through Manhattan traffic that had thinned to the late-night crowd, and found his apartment empty and too quiet. He poured a glass of whiskey he didn't drink, sat on the couch, and wondered when his life had become something that required whiskey just to get through the evening. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen next door. Lily's sleepover going well? Emma's mom says they're having a great time. Daniel typed back, good to hear. Thanks for checking. Another buzz, this time from a number he didn't recognize. This is Evelyn Harper. I know it's late, but I wanted to make sure you're doing okay. You seemed off when you left tonight. Daniel stared at the message. Off when he left. Had she been watching him? Monitoring his departure time? Keeping track of his emotional state like it was another item on her CEO to-do list? He typed, I'm fine. Thanks for checking. Her response came immediately. You're not fine. No one who's fine says they're fine that quickly. But I'll respect your privacy. Just know that if you need anything, time off, schedule flexibility, someone to talk to who won't judge, I'm here. Daniel set his phone down without responding. He didn't know what to do with Evelyn Harper's concern. It felt intrusive and genuine at the same time, like she'd breached some professional boundary but with good intentions, like she saw him as a person rather than just an employee, which was both comforting and terrifying. He finished the whiskey after all, fell asleep on the couch without meaning to, and woke up at 2 a.m. with a crick in his neck and the growing realization that something was going to break soon. He just didn't know what it would be. His resolve, his marriage, his sanity. Maybe all three at once. But for now, he hauled himself to bed and set his alarm for 6:30 because Lily needed to be picked up from her sleepover by 9:00, and then they had the whole weekend together before his mandatory vacation week started. One day at a time, one promise at a time, one breath at a time. That's all he could manage. And somehow, impossibly, it had been enough for 3 years. He just wasn't sure it would be enough for much longer. The vacation week started on a Monday morning with Lily bouncing into Daniel's room at 7 a.m., already dressed and full of energy that seemed criminal for someone who didn't have school. Dad, can we go to the zoo today? Emma went last week and she said they have baby penguins. Daniel groaned and pulled a pillow over his face. It's vacation. Vacation means sleeping past 7. It's already past 7. It's 7:03. Lily yanked the pillow away. Come on, the penguins are only babies for a little while. If we wait too long, they'll be regular penguins, and that's boring. All penguins are good penguins, Daniel muttered, but he was already sitting up, already calculating the logistics. Zoo opened at 10. They could grab breakfast first, get there by opening, beat most of the crowds. He'd need to adjust his hospital visit, maybe go early, around 8, then pick up Lily and head to the Bronx. Or skip the morning visit entirely and go in the evening instead. The thought of skipping even one visit made his chest tight, but Lily was looking at him with those expectant eyes. And this was supposed to be her vacation too. She spent every other week accommodating his schedule, working around his non-negotiable commitments. 1 week. He could be flexible for 1 week. Okay, he said. Zoo it is, but you're buying breakfast. I'm 8. I don't have money. Then I guess you're not eating. Lily giggled and launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. You're the best dad. I'm the only dad you've got, Daniel said, hugging her back. Low bar. They made it to the care center by 8:15, earlier than Daniel's usual visits. The morning shift nurse, Patricia, looked surprised to see him. Mr. Carter, you're early today. Oh, slight schedule change this week. Is it okay if we visit now? Of course. She's all set. We just finished morning care. Patricia smiled at Lily. You brought a helper today. Lily had been to the care center exactly 3 times in 3 years. Daniel tried to shield her from the worst of it, the machines, the tubes, the reality of what her mother had become. But sometimes the schedule didn't allow for shields, and today was one of those times. They went up to room 307 together. Lily's hand tightened Daniel's. She was always quiet here, her usual chatter dimmed by the weight of the place. Daniel understood. The care center had a way of pressing down on you, making noise feel disrespectful. Sarah lay in her usual position, unchanged from yesterday or the day before or the day before that. Lily stood in the doorway, not quite entering, her expression unreadable. You can talk to her, Daniel said gently. She can't answer, but she can hear you. How do you know? I don't, but I believe it anyway. Lily took a tentative step forward, then another, until she was standing beside the bed. She reached out and touched Sarah's hand, then pulled back quickly, like she'd touched something hot. She's warm. She's alive, sweetheart, just sleeping. For 3 years. Yeah. Daniel moved to stand beside Lily, his hand on her shoulder. For 3 years, Lily was silent for a long moment. Then, so quietly, Daniel almost missed it. I don't remember what she sounds like anymore. The words hit him like a physical blow. The words hit him. He'd been so focused on his own grief, on maintaining his promise to Sarah, that he'd forgotten Lily was losing her mother twice, once to the accident, and again to the slow erosion of memory that came with time. She had a voice that smiled, Daniel said, searching for words that wouldn't crumble. Even when she was saying something serious, you could hear the smile underneath. And she laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them. Drove me crazy, but I loved it anyway. What else? She sang off-key on purpose because it made you laugh. She made up stories at bedtime that never ended the same way twice. She called you Lily Bear even though you insisted you were too old for nicknames. Daniel's throat was tight. She loved you more than anything in the world. That part hasn't changed. Lily nodded, her eyes bright with tears she was trying not to shed. Can we go now? Yeah, we can go. They left after 10 minutes, the shortest visit Daniel had made in years, and drove to the Bronx Zoo with a silence between them that felt heavier than conversation. Lily stared out the window, and Daniel gripped the steering wheel too tight, and neither of them acknowledged that something had shifted in room 307. The zoo helped. Baby penguins helped. Cotton candy and overpriced zoo gifts helped. By noon, Lily was laughing again, dragging Daniel from exhibit to exhibit with her restored energy, pointing out animals and reading facts from the plaques with the kind of enthusiasm that made the morning's heaviness feel like a bad dream. They had lunch at the zoo cafe, mediocre pizza and watery soda, and Daniel found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in months. No schedule to keep, no deadline to meet. Just his daughter and an afternoon with nothing required except being present. Dad? Lily was working on her third slice of pizza, which seemed physically impossible given her size. Do you think Mom would want you to be happy? The question came out of nowhere, or maybe it had been building all morning, and Daniel didn't have a good answer ready. I am happy, he tried. No, you're not. Lily said it matter-of-factly, without accusation. You're sad all the time. You try to hide it, but I can tell. Daniel set down his own slice, appetite gone. It's complicated, Lily Bear. Don't call me that. I'm too old for nicknames. You're never too old. He reached across the table and took her hand. I'm sad because your mom can't be here with us. But I'm also happy because I have you. Both things can be true at the same time. But what about just you? Like, if me and Mom weren't here, would you be happy? You and Mom are the only things that make me me, Daniel said. Without you, I don't know who I'd be. Someone different. Someone I probably wouldn't recognize. Anytime. Lily absorbed this, her expression far too serious for 8 years old. Emma's mom has a boyfriend now. Emma says it's weird, but also kind of nice because he makes her mom laugh, and they didn't laugh much before. Daniel saw where this was going and wasn't sure how to navigate it. Emma's mom is allowed to have a boyfriend. There's nothing wrong with that. But you don't have a girlfriend. No. Why not? Because I'm still married to your mom's. But she's asleep. She's not really your wife anymore, right? She's just there. Daniel pulled his hand back, feeling something defensive and angry rise in his chest. She's absolutely still my wife. Being in a coma doesn't change that. Marriage doesn't stop just because things get difficult. I know. Lily's voice was small. I just thought maybe you could be happy if you had someone who could talk back. The anger drained away as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. I don't need someone who can talk back. I need you to finish your pizza so we can go see the giraffes. They didn't discuss it further, but the conversation sat between them for the rest of the afternoon, a question that Lily had asked and Daniel had failed to answer honestly. The truth was that he didn't know if he'd be happy with someone else. He'd stopped thinking of himself as someone who could have that kind of future. His life was Sarah and Lily, and the careful maintenance of promises that were becoming harder to keep with each passing year. That evening, he took Lily to dinner at the Italian place where Evelyn had seen them weeks ago. Not because he knew Evelyn had been there, but because it was Lily's favorite and the pizza was good and it was easier than cooking. They were halfway through their meal when Lily looked up from her plate with sudden intensity. "Dad, if Mom wakes up tomorrow, what happens?" Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Mom moshmats. Like, does she just come home? Does everything go back to normal? Does she remember us? "I don't know, sweetheart. The doctors say that even if she wakes up, she might not be the same person she was before. Brain injuries change people. So she might wake up and not know who we are. Boop. Maybe. Or she might wake up and need to relearn everything. Walking, talking, eating. It could take years of therapy." Daniel had researched this obsessively in the first year, reading every case study and medical journal he could find. "But even if she's different, she'd still be your mom. We'd figure it out together." Lily pushed her pizza around her plate. "What if she doesn't wake up ever? What if it's like this forever?" "Then it's like this forever," Daniel said simply. "And we keep going." "That's sad." "Yeah, it is." They finished dinner in silence, and Daniel paid the check and drove them home through evening traffic. And the whole time he was thinking about Lily's questions and his inadequate answers. He was raising his daughter to believe that love meant infinite patience, infinite sacrifice, and infinite commitment, even when the other person couldn't reciprocate. Was that the right lesson? Or was he just teaching her that her own happiness should always come second to everyone else's needs? He didn't know. He was making it up as he went along, hoping that intention would count for something when Lily was older and looked back at this time in her life. Tuesday morning, Daniel woke up to 17 missed calls and 12 text messages, all from a number he didn't recognize. His first thought was something had happened to Sarah. A crisis. A change. Something that required immediate attention. But when he called the number back, a woman's voice answered on the first ring. "Mr. Carter? This is Brenda from Lenox Hill. I've been trying to reach you since 6 a.m. Daniel's heart stopped. "What happened? Is Sarah? She's stable. But there was an incident last night. One of our night nurses noticed unusual readings on her monitors. Increased brain activity in several regions. We ran additional tests this morning, and the results are unexpected." "Unexpected how?" "Can you come in? Dr. Morrison wants to speak with you in person." Yeah. Daniel was dressed and out the door in 10 minutes, leaving a note for Lily, who was still asleep, and texting Mrs. Chen to check on her in an hour. He made it to the care center in record time, his mind spinning through possibilities. Brain activity could mean anything from a seizure to the impossible hope that Sarah was finally fighting her way back. Dr. Morrison met him in the consultation room near the ICU, a small space with uncomfortable chairs and lighting that made everyone look slightly jaundiced. The doctor was in his 50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of careful expression that came from delivering difficult news thousands of times. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming so quickly." Bum. "What's going on?" Brenda said there was unusual activity. There was. Starting around 2 a.m., we observed increased neural activity in Sarah's prefrontal cortex and temporal lobes. Not enough to suggest consciousness, but more than we've seen in the past 3 years. Dr. Morrison pulled up scans on his tablet, showing Daniel images that looked like abstract art, bright spots against dark backgrounds. This area here shows activation patterns consistent with auditory processing, and this region is associated with memory consolidation. Daniel stared at the scans. "What does that mean?" "Honestly, we're not sure. It could be a temporary fluctuation. The brain sometimes shows activity spikes that don't translate to meaningful change. But it could also indicate that Sarah's neural pathways are attempting to reorganize, to find new routes around the damaged areas. Could she wake up?" Dr. Morrison hesitated. "I don't want to give you false hope. The likelihood of meaningful recovery after 3 years is extremely low. But I also can't say it's impossible. The brain is more resilient than we once thought. If these activity patterns continue and strengthen, there's a possibility, small but real, that Sarah could regain some level of consciousness." Daniel sat down heavily, his legs suddenly unable to support him. "How small?" "What? The arm?" inch, 5%, maybe 10. And even if she does wake up, Mr. Carter, you need to understand that she wouldn't be the person you remember. There would be significant cognitive deficits. Memory loss, possible personality changes. She might not recognize you or your daughter. She might need full-time care for the rest of her life. But she'd be awake. In some form, yes. Daniel pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to process. 3 years of waiting, and suddenly there was a chance. A real quantifiable chance that Sarah might come back. Not whole, not healed, but present, aware, alive in more than just the biological sense. What do we do now? We monitor. We run daily scans. We watch for any changes in her condition. Dr. Morrison closed his tablet. And you prepare yourself for the possibility that this could be nothing. That tomorrow's scan might show everything back to baseline. Can I see her? Of course. Daniel went to room 307 in a daze. Sarah looked exactly the same, still, silent, suspended in her twilight state. But now the machines monitoring her had new significance. Now every beep and blip carried the weight of possibility. He took her hand, his grip tight enough to hurt. Sarah, if you can hear me, and the doctors think maybe you can, I need you to know we're still here, me and Lily. We're still waiting. We never stopped waiting. His voice cracked. I know it's been 3 years. I know that's a long time to be wherever you are. But if you can find your way back, even a little bit, we'll be here. I promise. The machines hummed. Sarah's chest rose and fell. Nothing visible changed. But somewhere deep in her brain, in regions Daniel couldn't see or touch or understand, neurons were firing in patterns they hadn't fired in 3 years. Connections were attempting to reconnect. A mind that had been silent was trying to remember how to speak. Daniel sat with her until noon, talking about nothing and everything, telling her about Lily's zoo trip and the baby penguins and the questions his daughter had asked that he didn't know how to answer. He told her about the hardship grant and Evelyn Harper's interference and his own desperate exhaustion. He told her he was sorry for the fight they'd had the morning of the accident. Sorry for every moment of their marriage when he'd been less than present. Sorry for not being able to fix what was broken. And the whole time, he hoped that somewhere in the darkness where Sarah existed, she could hear him. When he finally left to pick up Lily, he felt different. Lighter, somehow, despite the knowledge that this could all amount to nothing. For 3 years, he'd been living in a state of permanent stasis. Grief without resolution, love without reciprocation, hope without foundation. Now there was something concrete to hold on to. A 5% chance. Maybe 10. It wasn't much, but it was more than he'd had yesterday. He collected Lily from Mrs. Chen's apartment and took her for ice cream, and when she asked why he seemed weird, he told her the truth, that the doctors had seen some changes in her mom's brain, that it might not mean anything, but it might mean something, that they needed to be patient and keep hoping. Lily's face went through a series of expressions too complex to categorize, fear and hope, and something that looked almost like grief, like the possibility of Sarah waking up was somehow more painful than the certainty of her remaining asleep. What if she wakes up and doesn't like me anymore? Lily asked quietly. Daniel pulled her close. That's not possible. You're her daughter. That doesn't change no matter what. But I'm different now. I was 5 when it happened. She doesn't know 8-year-old me. Then we'll introduce you, and she'll love you all over again. Daniel kissed the top of her head. It's going to be okay, Lily Bear. One way or another, we'll figure it out. But he wasn't sure he believed it. The possibility of Sarah waking up opened doors he'd kept carefully closed for 3 years. What if she did wake up and didn't remember their marriage? What if she woke up and resented him for keeping her alive when her quality of life was non-existent? What if she woke up and wanted a divorce? Wanted to start over with someone who hadn't watched her deteriorate for 3 years? These were questions Daniel had spent 3 years avoiding by telling himself they were theoretical. Now they might be practical, and he had no idea how to prepare for that. Wednesday morning, he called the office to extend his vacation by another week. He didn't ask permission, just sent an email to Evelyn explaining that a family medical situation required his attention and he'd be using additional PTO. Her response came within minutes. Take whatever time you need. Keep me updated if you can. We'll manage here. No questions, no demands for details. Just immediate, unconditional support. Daniel stared at the email for a long time, trying to figure out when Evelyn Harper had gone from being his boss to being something that resembled a friend. He wasn't sure he wanted that complication in his life, but he also couldn't deny that her understanding made things easier. The next scan showed continued activity. The scan after that showed slight improvement. By Friday, Dr. Morrison was using words like encouraging and unusual and worth monitoring closely, which in medical speak meant they had no idea what was happening, but it was definitely something. Daniel spent every day at the care center, sometimes bringing Lily, sometimes going alone. He talked until his voice was hoarse, played music Sarah used to love, read aloud from books she'd mentioned wanting to read someday. He did everything he could think of to give her brain something to latch onto, some reason to keep fighting its way back from wherever it had gone. And on Saturday afternoon, 1 week after the first scan showed unusual activity, Sarah's right hand twitched. It was subtle, barely perceptible, the kind of movement that could have been a muscle spasm or random nerve firing. But Brenda was in the room adjusting Sarah's IV when it happened, and she saw it too. "Did you see that?" Daniel was on his feet immediately. Her hand, it moved. Brenda checked Sarah's vitals, her expression carefully neutral. "I'll page Dr. Morrison. Stay here. Ikoi." Daniel stood beside the bed, his heart racing, watching Sarah's hand like it might perform a miracle if he stared hard enough. It didn't move again, but it had moved once, and that was enough to crack open a door that had been closed for 3 years. Dr. Morrison arrived 20 minutes later and ran a series of tests, checking reflexes, monitoring brain activity, looking for any sign that the hand movement was purposeful rather than random. The results were inconclusive but not discouraging, which Daniel had learned was the best you could hope for in situations like this. "We'll continue monitoring," Dr. Morrison said. "If she shows more voluntary movement, we'll adjust her care plan accordingly. But Mr. Carter, I want to be clear. This could still go either way. Progress isn't linear with brain injuries." "I understand," Daniel said. But inside, he was already constructing hope from scraps and wishful thinking, building castles out of a single hand twitch. He stayed until visiting hours ended, then went home and lay awake all night, replaying that moment over and over. Sarah's hand moving. Proof that somewhere inside that still body, his wife was trying to come back. Sunday morning, his phone rang at 6 a.m. Dr. Morrison's voice was careful. "Mr. Carter, you need to come in. Sarah's awake." Daniel made it to the care center in 15 minutes, breaking every speed limit between his apartment and East 77th Street. He left Lily with Mrs. Chen without explanation, just a hurried emergency and a promise to call soon, and drove through empty Sunday morning streets with his hands shaking on the wheel. Awake. Sarah was awake. After 3 years of silence, of waiting, of one-sided conversations with a woman who couldn't respond, she was awake. He burst through the care center doors and took the stairs 2 at a time because waiting for the elevator felt impossible. Dr. Morrison met him outside room 307, his expression unreadable. "Before you go in, you need to understand what you're about to see. I don't care. I just need to see her. Guess, Mr. Carter." Dr. Morrison's voice was firm. "Sarah is conscious, but she's extremely confused and disoriented. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't remember the accident. And she doesn't—" He paused. "She doesn't remember the past 8 years." The words took a moment to land. "What do you mean?" "Her last clear memory is from 2018. She thinks she's 24 years old. She doesn't remember marrying you. She doesn't remember your daughter. From her perspective, she went to sleep one night and woke up 3 years older in a hospital room." Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. "That's impossible. It's called retrograde amnesia, common with traumatic brain injuries. Sometimes memories return over time. Sometimes they don't." Dr. Morrison put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you were hoping for." Daniel pushed past him and into the room. Sarah was sitting up in bed, actually sitting, propped against pillows, her eyes open and moving, tracking across the room with the jerky movements of someone trying to process too much information at once. Brenda stood beside her, speaking in low, calm tones, and when Sarah turned her head toward the door and saw Daniel, her expression went blank. "Who are you?" 3 words. The first words his wife had spoken to him in 3 years, and they shattered everything. Daniel crossed to the bed slowly, like approaching a spooked animal. I'm Daniel. Daniel Carter. We know each other. I don't know you. Sarah's voice was hoarse from disuse, scratchy and uncertain. Where am I? What happened? The doctor said I was in an accident, but I don't remember any accident. You were driving back from your sister's place. A truck hit you. You've been here for 3 years. Sarah stared at him like he was speaking a language she didn't understand. 3 years? That's not... I can't have been... She looked down at her hands, really seeing them for the first time. They were thinner than she remembered, the skin pale from lack of sun, an IV line running into her left arm. This isn't real. This is a dream. I'm dreaming. Get warm, this is. You're not dreaming. Daniel sat carefully in the chair beside her bed. I know this is overwhelming. I know you don't remember. But Sarah, it's 2025. You're 32 years old, and we're married. No. Sarah shook her head violently. No, I'm not married. I'm in grad school. I'm writing my thesis on educational equity. I don't even have a boyfriend right now. You finished grad school in 2019, Daniel said quietly. You became a teacher. We got married in 2020. We have a daughter. Her name is Lily, and she's 8 years old. The color drained from Sarah's face. I have a daughter? Yes. With you? Yes. Sarah pressed her hands to her face, her breathing coming fast and shallow. This can't be happening. This isn't real. I don't know you. I don't have a daughter. She looked at Daniel with something close to panic. Why can't I remember any of this? Dr. Morrison stepped forward. Sarah, your brain experienced significant trauma. Memory loss is a common side effect. Sometimes memories return naturally. Sometimes we can help recover them through therapy. But right now, you need to focus on physical recovery. The rest will come. Or it won't, Sarah said flatly. She looked at Daniel again, her expression searching. You really think you're my husband? Well, I don't think. I know. Daniel pulled out his phone with trembling hands and scrolled to his photos. Here, this is from our wedding day. Sarah took the phone and stared at the image. Her younger self in a simple white dress, standing beside this stranger who claimed to be her husband, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. She swiped to the next photo. Her holding a newborn baby, exhausted and radiant. Next photo. A toddler on her shoulders, both of them at what looked like a beach. Next photo. A little girl in a gymnastics leotard holding up a trophy. That's Lily, Daniel said. She looks just like you. Same smile, same stubbornness, same terrible sense of humor. Sarah handed the phone back like it was burning her. I don't remember any of this. Those pictures could be anyone. They're not anyone. They're you. They're us. They're the life we built together. Daniel's voice cracked. Sarah, I know you don't remember, but I do. I remember everything. I remember the first time we met. You spilled coffee on me at a student union. I remember the night I proposed. We were in your terrible apartment with the radiator that didn't work, and you said yes before I even finished asking. I remember the day Lily was born. You were in labor for 16 hours, and you threatened to murder me at least 6 times. Stop! Sarah closed her eyes. Please stop. I can't. I need you to leave. Sarah, I don't know you. I don't care what those pictures show or what you remember. Right now, to me, you're a stranger, and I need you to leave. Dr. Morrison touched Daniel's arm. Let's give her some time. This is a lot to process. Daniel stood on shaking legs, feeling like he'd been gutted. I'll come back later. When you're ready to talk, I'll be here. Sarah didn't respond. She just lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling, her expression carved from stone. Daniel left room 307 feeling like he'd lost Sarah twice. Once to the accident, and now to whatever had happened in her brain that made her look at him like he was nothing. Like 8 years together had been erased, leaving behind a stranger who happened to wear his wife's face. He sat in his car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to figure out what came next. He'd spent 3 years waiting for Sarah to wake up, building his entire life around that possibility. And now she was awake and didn't want him there. Didn't know him. Didn't remember loving him or choosing him or building a life with him. His phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn Harper. Heard from Dr. Morrison. I'm so sorry. If you need anything, time off, someone to talk to, help with logistics, let me know. Daniel stared at the message. Evelyn had been in contact with Sarah's doctor? When had that happened? How much did she know about his situation? He typed back, "How did you know to contact Dr. Morrison?" Her response came quickly. "I've been helping with Sarah's medical expenses since March. The hardship grant was just the beginning. I set up an arrangement with the care center to cover anything your insurance doesn't. Dr. Morrison updates me monthly. I should have told you, but I knew you'd refuse if I asked permission." Daniel read the message 3 times, trying to process. Evelyn Harper, his CEO, had been secretly paying for his wife's medical care for months. Thousands of dollars, probably tens of thousands. And she'd never mentioned it, never asked for anything in return. Just quietly removed one of the crushing weights that had been slowly destroying him. He called her directly, not caring that it was barely 7 a.m. on a Sunday. "Daniel," she answered on the first ring. "Are you okay? Yo, why would you do that? Pay for Sarah's care, you barely know me. I know you enough. I know you're a good person in an impossible situation. I know you've been drowning and too proud to ask for help, and I know I have resources you don't." Her voice softened. "I'm not asking for gratitude. I'm not keeping score. I just saw something that needed fixing and I fixed it. I can't accept this." You already did. The money's been going to the care center for months. Unless you want to write me a check for $60,000 right now, you're stuck with it. She paused. "How is Sarah?" "Awake, but not back. She doesn't remember me. Doesn't remember our marriage. Doesn't remember Lily. She looked at me like I was a stranger trying to scam her." "I'm sorry." All sorry to you." "Yeah, me too." Daniel closed his eyes. "I don't know what to do now. I spent 3 years waiting for her to wake up, and now that she has, I'm not sure it matters." "It matters," Evelyn said firmly. "She's alive. She's conscious. That's more than you had yesterday." "Is it? What's the point of her being awake if she doesn't remember anything worth being awake for?" "The point is that she gets to decide what her life means now. Not you, not the circumstances. Her." Evelyn's voice was gentle but unyielding. "You kept her alive, Daniel. You honored your promises. You did everything you could. But she's awake now, and that means she gets a say in what comes next. Even if that say doesn't include you the way you hoped." The words settled into Daniel's chest like stones. "You think I should let her go, eh?" "I think you should let her choose. There's a difference." After they hung up, Daniel sat in the parking lot until the sun climbed high enough to burn away the morning chill. Then he drove home, collected Lily from Mrs. Chen with a brief explanation that her mom was awake but confused, and spent the rest of Sunday trying to figure out how to tell an 8-year-old that her mother had finally woken up but didn't remember she existed. That evening, he tried visiting Sarah again. She was awake, watching a nurse adjust her IV with an expression of deep suspicion, and when Daniel appeared in the doorway, her face closed off immediately. "I asked you to leave." "I know, but I have someone who wants to meet you." Daniel stepped aside, revealing Lily standing in the hallway, her hand gripped tight in his. "This is your daughter." Sarah looked at Lily for a long moment. Lily looked back, her expression caught between hope and terror, and the silence stretched until Daniel thought something might break. "Hi," Lily finally said, her voice small. "I'm Lily. I'm Sheer 8. I do gymnastics, and I'm good at math, and my favorite color is purple." "Hi," Sarah said carefully. "You seem like a nice kid. You're my mom." "I don't remember being your mom. I'm sorry." Lily's face crumpled, and Daniel felt his heart crack straight down the middle. He pulled his daughter against his side as she started crying. Quiet, controlled sobs that were somehow worse than screaming. "It's okay," he murmured. "It's going to be okay." "She doesn't remember me," Lily choked out. "I thought when she woke up, everything would be normal again, but she doesn't even know who I am." Hochschwaki. Sarah was watching them with an expression Daniel couldn't read. Confusion and guilt and something that might have been grief for a life she couldn't remember living. "I'm sorry," she said again. "I wish I could remember, but I can't." Daniel took Lily home. They stopped for ice cream that neither of them ate, and when they got back to the apartment, Lily went straight to her room and closed the door. Daniel stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing, trying to figure out how they move forward from here. His phone rang. Margaret Carter, his mother, who he'd called earlier with the news about Sarah waking up. How is she? Awake. Aware. No memory of the past 8 years. Daniel slumped into a chair. She doesn't know me, Mom. She looks at me like I'm lying about everything. Give her time. The doctor said memories might return. And if they don't? What then? His mother was quiet for a moment. Then you figure out what comes next. You've been living in limbo for 3 years, Danny. Maybe this is a chance to finally move forward. She's my wife. But she's a woman who doesn't remember being your wife. That's different. Margaret's voice was gentle. I'm not saying give up on her. I'm saying maybe it's time to let yourself imagine a life that isn't just waiting. After they hung up, Daniel sat in the dark apartment and let himself think about what his mother had said. 3 years of his life spent in a holding pattern, refusing to move forward because moving forward felt like betrayal. 3 years of turning down promotions and opportunities, and even basic human connection, because he'd convinced himself that staying was the same as loving. But Sarah was awake now, and she didn't want what he'd been offering. Maybe that meant something. Maybe it meant he'd kept his promise, kept her alive, cared for her, honored his vows. But the promise had an expiration date he hadn't seen coming. Maybe devotion didn't mean holding on forever. Maybe it meant knowing when to let go. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel visited Sarah every day. Sometimes she tolerated his presence. Sometimes she asked him to leave after 5 minutes. Slowly, painfully, he told her about their life together. The good parts, the hard parts, the ordinary accumulation of years that made up a marriage. He showed her more photos, played videos on his phone of her reading to toddler Lily, blowing out birthday candles, dancing at a friend's wedding. Sarah watched everything with the polite interest of someone viewing artifacts from someone else's life. Nothing sparked recognition. Nothing brought back the memories locked somewhere in her damaged brain. Dr. Morrison remained cautiously optimistic about physical recovery. Sarah's motor functions were returning ahead of schedule. Her speech was clear. Her cognitive abilities seemed largely intact except for the memory loss. But the amnesia showed no signs of resolving. It's been 2 weeks, Daniel said during a consultation on a Friday afternoon. Shouldn't something have come back by now? Not necessarily. Some patients recover memories months or years later. Some never do. Dr. Morrison closed Sarah's chart. The brain doesn't follow a predictable timeline. I'm sorry. Boom. That evening, Daniel brought Lily for another visit. Sarah had requested it, which felt like progress even though Daniel suspected it was more about guilt than genuine interest. They sat in room 307 making awkward small talk. Sarah asking questions about school, Lily answering in monosyllables, Daniel trying to facilitate a connection that clearly wasn't there. Finally, Sarah said, "Can I ask you something, and I need you to be honest?" "Okay," Daniel said. "Do you resent me for not remembering?" The question landed like a punch. "No, of course not. You should. You spent 3 years taking care of me, visiting every day, keeping me alive. And now I'm awake and I don't remember any of it. I don't remember loving you or choosing you or building a life with you. That must be awful." "It is awful," Daniel admitted, "but it's not your fault." I know it's not my fault, but that doesn't make it less unfair to you." Sarah looked at Lily, or to her. Lily was silent, picking at a thread on her jeans, her expression carefully blank. Sarah continued, "The doctors say I'll be discharged in a few weeks. I need to figure out where I go from here, what my life looks like now. And I think maybe it's better if that life doesn't include trying to force myself to remember things that might never come back." Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't think I can be your wife. Not when I don't remember choosing to be your wife. Not when looking at you doesn't feel like coming home. It just feels like looking at a stranger who wants something from me I can't give." She paused. "I'm sorry. I know that's not what you want to hear." "What do you want?" Daniel asked quietly. "I want to figure out who I am now. Not who I was 8 years ago. Not who you remember. Who I actually am with the brain I have left. Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Sarah's buanta. I'm grateful for everything you did, keeping me alive, staying when most people would have left. But I can't live my life trying to become someone I don't remember being. Lily stood abruptly. I need to go to the bathroom. She left before anyone could respond, and Daniel listened to his daughter's footsteps disappearing down the hall, and felt like everything he'd built over 3 years was collapsing in slow motion. I understand, he said, because what else could he say? Sarah was right. She couldn't force herself to love someone she didn't remember. Couldn't be a wife and mother to people who felt like strangers. The woman he'd married was gone, and in her place was someone new. Someone shaped by trauma and loss into a different version of the person he'd loved. I'll file for divorce, he continued. Make it easy for you. You won't have to do anything. I'll handle it. Daniel! It's okay. Really. He stood, feeling older than his 32 years. I loved you. I still love the person you were, but you're right. You're not that person anymore. And holding on to who you were isn't fair to who you are now. He found Lily in the hallway, sitting on a bench with her knees pulled to her chest. She looked up when he approached, her face streaked with tears. She doesn't want us, does she? She wants to figure out who she is now. That's different. Daniel sat beside his daughter and pulled her close. People change, Lily Bear. Sometimes because of time, sometimes because of things that happened to them. Your mom changed because of the accident. She's still a good person. She's just not the same person she was before. I hate her, Lily said fiercely. No, you don't, Chat. I do. I hate that she left us. I hate that she came back wrong. I hate that she's awake, and it doesn't even matter because she still doesn't want to be my mom. Daniel didn't argue. Lily had a right to her anger, had earned it through 3 years of a half-present father and an absent mother, and a childhood that looked nothing like what either of them had imagined. They drove home in silence, and that night Daniel lay awake thinking about promises, and what happened when the person you made them to became someone else entirely. He'd promised to love Sarah in sickness and health, till death do them part. He'd kept that promise. But Sarah had died in a way that didn't involve her heart stopping. She died when her brain had reorganized itself into new patterns that didn't include him. And maybe that was okay. Maybe keeping a promise didn't mean holding on forever. Maybe it meant doing everything you could, and then, when you'd done everything, accepting that some things couldn't be fixed. The divorce papers arrived in mid-July. Daniel signed them without reading them closely, initiated the split of assets that didn't amount to much because everything had gone to medical bills anyway, and filed them with the county clerk on a Tuesday afternoon that felt like the end of something he couldn't name. Evelyn called him that evening. I heard about the divorce. How are you holding up? Mama, I'm fine. Daniel was sitting on his couch, a beer warming in his hand, watching the sun set over Manhattan through his apartment window. It's the right thing. She can't be my wife if she doesn't remember choosing me. That's very mature of you. It doesn't feel mature. It feels like giving up. It's not giving up. It's accepting reality. Evelyn paused. For what it's worth, I think you did everything right. You kept your promises. You stayed when it was hard. You honored your vows even when no one would have blamed you for walking away. That matters. Does it? She's still gone. I still lost her. You lost the person she was. But you helped keep her alive long enough to become someone new. That's not nothing, Daniel. After they hung up, Daniel thought about that. 3 years of his life spent in service of a promise to a person who no longer existed. 3 years of sacrifice and devotion and choosing duty over happiness. It should have felt wasted. It should have felt like the universe playing a cruel joke. But it didn't. It felt like he'd done what he was supposed to do, even though the outcome wasn't what he'd hoped for. And maybe that was the point. Maybe love wasn't about outcomes. Maybe it was about showing up, doing the work, keeping your word, even when the person you'd given your word to couldn't remember receiving it. Sarah was discharged from the care center in early August and moved into a transitional living facility that specialized in brain injury rehabilitation. Daniel paid the first 3 months' rent before Evelyn quietly took over the payments through another anonymous grant. Sarah started therapy, physical, occupational, cognitive, and slowly rebuilt a life that looked nothing like the one she'd had before. Daniel saw her occasionally, brief encounters in the care center lobby or at scheduled meetings with her medical team. They were polite, cordial, like acquaintances who'd once known each other better. She never remembered. The memories never came back. Lily struggled. She stopped gymnastics, her interest evaporating when the things she'd been doing to make her absent mother proud became pointless. Her grades slipped. She started fights at school, small provocations that got her sent to the principal's office twice in September. Daniel took her to a therapist who specialized in childhood grief, and slowly, painfully, his daughter started processing the reality that her mother was alive but also gone in every way that mattered. At work, something shifted. Daniel started staying past 5:30 occasionally, not out of obligation, but because he'd stopped having a reason to leave on the dot. He accepted a senior analyst position in October and discovered he was good at leading a team when he let himself care about more than just getting through the day. He went to happy hours. He had lunch with Jennifer Sosa and actually enjoyed the conversation. He started building a life that existed beyond the narrow parameters he'd constructed 3 years ago. And Evelyn Harper watched all of it with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd intervened in a disaster and watched the survivors figure out how to rebuild. On a Friday evening in late October, she stopped by Daniel's desk at 5:45, still before his old departure time, but well past his new normal. "Want to grab dinner?" Daniel looked up, surprised. "Dinner? Yeah, that thing where you eat food in the evening. I hear it's very popular." She smiled. "I figured you could use some company that isn't 8 years old or court-mandated therapy." They went to a Thai place near the office and talked about work and life and everything in between. Evelyn told him about her own divorce, the ex-husband who'd been right that she cared more about her career, and how she'd spent years thinking that made her a failure until she'd realized it just made her honest. "I don't know how to not be ambitious," she admitted. "It's wired into me. But watching you these past months made me realize ambition and devotion aren't opposites. They're just different ways of showing up for what matters to you." "I'm not sure I showed up right," Daniel said. "I lost my wife anyway." "You didn't lose her. She changed. That's different. And you adapted. That takes strength most people don't have." They finished dinner and walked back toward the subway, and at some point, Evelyn said, "I'm not trying to replace her. Just so we're clear, this isn't me making a move." "I know," Daniel said. And he did. This was friendship, or the beginning of something like it. Two people who'd seen each other at their worst and decided that was enough reason to stick around. November came, and with it Thanksgiving. Daniel and Lily spent it with his mother in her small house upstate, eating too much turkey and watching football neither of them cared about. And for the first time in 3 years, it felt okay. Not perfect, not healed. Just okay. Lily asked once about seeing Sarah for the holiday. Daniel called the transitional facility and Sarah said no, she wasn't ready, maybe some other time, and Lily cried for an hour, but then moved on because that's what kids did when staying stuck wasn't an option. In December, Daniel got a card in the mail from Sarah. Inside was a short note written in handwriting that looked like hers but felt different, each word carefully formed like she was still learning to write. "Thank you for everything you did. I'm sorry I can't be who you needed me to be. I hope you and Lily find happiness. You both deserve it." S. Daniel kept the card in his desk drawer at work, taking it out occasionally when he needed a reminder that closure didn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looked like a stranger thanking you for keeping her alive long enough to become someone new. On Christmas Eve, Evelyn invited him and Lily to her apartment for dinner. It was a small gathering, just the three of them, plus Evelyn's mother who visited from Boston and spent the evening telling embarrassing stories about young Evelyn's ruthless approach to grade school fundraisers. Lily laughed, genuinely laughed, and Daniel realized it was the first time he'd heard that sound in months. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep on Evelyn's couch, and Daniel was helping clean up, Evelyn said, "You're doing okay. You know that, right?" "Some days I think so. Other days I'm not sure. That's how it works. Grief isn't linear. Recovery isn't linear. You just keep showing up, and eventually showing up becomes living." She handed him a dish to dry. "I'm proud of you, if that's allowed." "Why small?" "Because you could have broken. Most people would have, but you didn't. You bent, but you didn't break. You kept your daughter safe. and yourself functional, and your promises intact even when it cost you everything. That's extraordinary. Daniel dried the dish slowly. Daniel, thinking about extraordinary and whether it applied to him or whether it was just what happened when you loved someone enough to let them go. I'm not sure I'm ready to be anything other than a father and an employee, he said quietly. I know people expect me to move on, find someone new, build a different life, but I can't think about that yet. Then don't. You get to take as much time as you need. No one gets to tell you when you're ready. Evelyn put away the last of the dishes. But when you are ready, I hope you'll let yourself be happy, really happy. Not just okay, not just functional, actually happy. I don't remember what that feels like. Then we'll figure it out together, as friends. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who've survived their own disasters, helping each other remember what it's like to live. In January, Sarah moved to a supported living community in Connecticut, closer to her sister. She started taking classes at a community college, pursuing interests she'd had before the accident and new ones she'd discovered in its aftermath. She sent occasional updates through her lawyer, brief, clinical reports that Daniel read and filed away like medical records. She was rebuilding, so was he. Lily asked less frequently about seeing her mother as the months passed. The gaps between requests stretched from weeks to months, and Daniel understood that his daughter was learning to grieve someone who was alive, learning that sometimes love meant accepting. You couldn't have what you wanted no matter how much you deserved it. It was a terrible lesson for an 8-year-old to learn, but it was a lesson she was learning anyway, and Daniel did his best to help her carry it without being crushed. At work, Daniel discovered he was good at mentorship. He started training junior analysts, teaching them not just the technical skills but the softer ones: how to talk to clients, how to navigate office politics, how to balance ambition with humanity. He found meaning in helping people who reminded him of his younger self, back before tragedy had forced him to choose between career and family. And Evelyn became something like a friend, then something more than a friend, without either of them quite naming what that meant. They had dinner once a week. They talked on the phone. They showed up for each other in the small, consistent ways that mattered more than grand gestures. In March, a year after Sarah had woken up, Daniel took Lily to visit her at the Connecticut facility. Sarah looked healthier than she had in years, stronger, more present, more herself, even though that self was a stranger. She and Lily talked for an hour, awkward but genuine, and at the end, Sarah hugged her daughter with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry I can't remember being your mom, but I'd like to try being something, if that's okay with you. Lily nodded, not quite ready to forgive, but willing to try, and that felt like progress. On the drive home, Lily said, Do you still love her? Daniel thought about it. I love who she was. I respect who she is now. But I'm not in love with her anymore. That person's gone. Is that sad? Yeah, it's sad. But it's also okay to be sad about something and move forward anyway. Like how I'm sad about Mom, but also excited about the spring gymnastics showcase? Exactly like that. And in April, Evelyn's company announced a major expansion, and she asked Daniel to lead a new division focused on ethical investing. It was a promotion he'd have turned down automatically a year ago. Now he said yes without hesitation and discovered he was good at it, that he could care about his career without it consuming him. That ambition and balance weren't mutually exclusive. Lily thrived. She went back to gymnastics, not because she wanted to impress her mother, but because she genuinely loved it. She made new friends. She stopped getting in fights at school. She started talking about the future like it was something to look forward to rather than something to survive. And Daniel learned what his mother and Evelyn had been trying to tell him all along, that keeping a promise and moving forward weren't opposites. That he could honor what he'd had with Sarah while also building something new. That love didn't require holding on forever. Sometimes it required the opposite. In June, 2 years after that first vacation week when Sarah had shown the first signs of waking, Daniel took Lily to Montana. The dude ranch Sarah had wanted to visit before the accident. They rode horses and slept under stars and talked about hard things in the way that was only possible when you were miles from home with nothing but time. Do you think you'll ever fall in love again? Lily asked one night around the campfire. Maybe. Someday. When I'm ready. With Ms. Harper? Daniel smiled. You're too smart for 9 years old. I'm 9.5, and I think Ms. Harper likes you. She looks at you the way Emma's mom looks at her boyfriend. It's complicated. Everything's complicated. That doesn't mean it's bad. The next morning, Daniel called Evelyn from the ranch's spotty cell service. How's Montana? Beautiful. Terrifying. Lily keeps trying to convince me to let her ride without a helmet because the cowboys don't wear them. She's got a point about the cowboys. You're not helping. Daniel paused. When I get back, would you want to have dinner? Just the two of us, as more than friends. A beat of silence, then, carefully, are you sure you're ready? No, but I'm ready to try being ready. There's a difference. Yeah, Evelyn said softly. There is. They went to dinner the week after Daniel returned from Montana. It was awkward and comfortable at the same time. Two people who'd seen each other's worst moments trying to figure out if they could build something in the aftermath. They didn't rush. They didn't make promises neither of them was ready to keep. They just showed up and tried, which was all anyone could do. Sarah continued her recovery, building a life that looked nothing like the one she'd lost. She started dating someone from her support group, another brain injury survivor who understood what she'd been through. She took classes. She worked part-time at a nonprofit. She became someone new, someone who sent occasional messages to Daniel thanking him for keeping her alive, even though she couldn't remember why. And Daniel made peace with that, with the reality that sometimes you did everything right and still didn't get the ending you wanted. That devotion didn't guarantee reciprocation. That staying didn't always mean the person you were staying for would stay with you. What he'd done for Sarah hadn't been wasted. It had kept a human being alive, given her a chance to rebuild, honored promises that mattered even when no one was watching. And that meant something, even if the meaning looked different than he'd imagined. He learned that love wasn't just a feeling. It was a series of choices made over and over, sometimes for years, sometimes for a lifetime. He learned that those choices mattered regardless of outcome, that showing up counted even when the person you were showing up for didn't remember you'd been there. Lily asked him once, years later, when she was old enough to really understand, if he regretted staying with her mom for as long as he did. Never, Daniel said without hesitation. Your mom deserved someone to fight for her. You deserved a father who showed you what commitment looks like. And I needed to know I was the kind of person who kept his word, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. But you lost 3 years. I didn't lose them. I spent them on something that mattered. There's a difference. And maybe that was the lesson worth keeping, the truth that emerged from the wreckage. You didn't measure a life by its outcomes. You measured it by what you were willing to show up for when no one was keeping score, by the promises you kept even when keeping them hurt, by the love you gave even when the person you gave it to couldn't give it back. Daniel had lost his wife to an accident that stole her memory and her past. But he'd kept his promises. He'd honored his vows. He'd shown his daughter what devotion looked like, even when it cost everything. That wasn't a failure. It was just a different kind of success. One the world didn't always recognize, but that mattered anyway. And in the end, when the dust settled and the grief softened and life rebuilt itself in new configurations, Daniel found he could live with that. Could even, on good days, be proud of it. He'd loved someone with everything he had. When she'd needed him most, he'd been there. When she'd woken up as someone new, he'd let her go. That was enough. It had to be enough. And slowly, year by year, it became more than enough. It became the foundation for a life that honored the past without being trapped by it. A life that made room for new love without erasing old love. A life that taught Lily what it meant to keep your word while also knowing when to release the person you'd given that word to. Some stories didn't end with reconciliation. Some stories ended with two people walking different paths, grateful for what they'd shared even if they couldn't share it anymore. Daniel's story was one of those, and he'd made peace with that, one hard-earned day at a time. LAU.